Good evening. We still have a few folks coming into the room. We're up to 107 participants. I'm going to give it just about a minute or so, and we'll get our fall delivery model form started in 1 minute. All right, welcome to all the participants in the room today. We certainly appreciate your time and thank you for your commitment to our community and to your children and our students. Tonight is an important night in our planning process for the fall delivery model for the Port Angeles School District. And I can assure each participant there will be much time at the end of this presentation tonight to hear your feedback and comments to help guide our decisions. Next slide. So my name is Martin Brewer, the superintendent, and the panelists this evening, we have the assistant superintendent, Chuck List. We have Dry Creek principal, Michelle Olson, special services director, Pam Sanford in the room, and technology director, Jared Blauser. When it comes to the Q&A, this panel will have the opportunity to answer any questions you may have based on this planning. Also in the room this evening, I'm proud to present the Board of Directors for the Port Angeles School District. We have Board President, Dr. Sandy Long. We have Board Vice President, Sarah Methler, Board Director, Katie Marks, Board Director, Cindy Kelly, and Board Director, Jacob Wright. Thank you for joining us this evening. Next slide. So we're gonna go through a lot of information tonight in a pretty quick fashion, and we want to do so to leave that ample time on the back end to answer any questions you might have and hear your comments and feedback. So what we know as of today for reopening schools in the state of Washington for health and safety requirements. This is not guidance. These are requirements as we speak today. And I caution all of the listeners today that, you know, our landscape is changing almost daily. But I'm going to share with you this evening what we know today in preparation for the fall. We know first that health screening at entry of each school day will be required. That comes in two forms. We'll have the opportunity to do a verbal screen with each child as they enter school on a daily basis, as well as a temperature check. Those two features will be required upon entry each day into next calendar school year. The second item that we do know, and I know this is a hot topic across the state of Washington, but cloth face masks and cloth face coverings will be required at this point in time for all staff and students. There are some exceptions, and I'm not going to read those exceptions to you, but you can see the exceptions for cloth face coverings when they should not be worn by a student. But again, this landscape is changing. There is a significant dialogue at this point in time around face masks versus face shields for some of our students. But at this point in time, we are gearing up and hearing that cloth face coverings will be required to some capacity. Next slide, please. We also know that physical distancing will be required by the Washington State Department of Health. This is a significant challenge for our school systems. Simply put, there is a 6-foot social distance requirement in all of our teaching and learning spaces next year. So we have to map out each classroom across our district and have a 6-foot social distance spacing between students as they're seated throughout the day. It creates a significant challenge as we're moving forward to plan on what our delivery model will look like for the 2021 school year. You can see some of the challenges that are being shared with our district at this point in time through the Department of Health. Recommendations are to cancel field trips, to modify classes where students are likely to have very close contact, suspend and make significant modifications to high-risk spaces or high-risk opportunities such as choir and other classes, increase space between desks, reduce the number of students in the hall at one time, stagger arrival and dismissal times, reduce congestion in the health office area, limit non-essential visitors, limit cross-school transfers for special programs, teach staff and students how to appropriately maintain distance, and keep students outside as much as weather permits. And so, this creates a very significant challenge for us as it relates to space within schools. Next slide. So that leads us to our challenge. The Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction came out with the guiding document, and I'm sure many of you have read through that document, but he has challenged each school in the state of Washington to be prepared for 3 options next year. 1, distance learning 2.0, and how we frame that is this year, we call that distance learning 1.0. Simply put, distance learning 2.0, if we transition to that at some point in time next school year, we need to be prepared to do so in a very quick fashion. In less than, in 24 to 48 hours, we need to be able to transition to a distance learning 2.0 and have a more cohesive delivery system. The next option that we are required to have a plan for is what the state is referring to as a hybrid model. And this is a combination of face-to-face learning as well as distance learning. And then finally, the third option that we need to be prepared for is schools that are open, run on regular schedule, on regular times. And so tonight, for our presentation purposes, we're going to spend a lot of time on item 2, the hybrid model, which is, practices that social distance that we are going to be required and what limitations we might have there. Next slide, please. So I want to share up front how we are going to determine the hybrid model for the Port Angeles School District. And we want this to be a collaborative, interactive process. So on or around June 8th, we completed a survey, and I'm going to share some data from that survey in just on the next slide. We also have put together a delivery model work group. This group is made up of representation from across our entire district. It's 51 strong, and we've met now well over 15 hours to kind of look at the models that we'll present to you tonight and kind of weigh the pros and cons of each model. Their feedback will be critical in this decision making, as well as the stakeholder feedback from tonight in the community forum. Again, there'll be ample time at the end of this presentation tonight to share your thoughts and comments around Port Angeles School District as we move forward. This plan for the hybrid model, when it is encapsulated to its final state, will be then presented to the school board for approval sometime this summer. Our vision is July, and we hope to be able to do that. Next slide. So a little bit about the survey results that was completed on June 8th. So we had a pretty good response. Well over 1,300 families responded, and we asked some questions that will look familiar to you that we'll share this evening. The first question there states, when we reopen schools, and we're under state mandate to receive or to have smaller groupings, what would be your preference? And 58% of the population preferred alternating days and weeks versus 34% preferred half days or an AM/PM model. We also asked an important question to us as we move forward in hybrid and distance learning options around, access. Who has what, how many families have the technology, including Wi-Fi, to carry out remote learning. And from those families that did participate in the survey, just about 93% indicated that they did have the necessary technology to carry out distance learning. Next slide. The next question speaks to how satisfied you were in the remote learning plan 1.0. And 49% said satisfied and 29% said dissatisfied. So I think this really validates the work we did this spring. It was a lot of hard work, and every layer of this organization worked very, very hard to carry out that work. And I'm appreciative that the community does recognize that. So thank you for that feedback. We also asked the question, if schools were not to open in September, how could we improve? And 66% reported that they would like to see more live video, video-based instruction. 64% wanted more routine, and 41% wanted more emphasis placed on grades and accountability. So that's all very, very good work or information for us to consider moving forward. Next slide. So as I referenced, we're going to spend a lot of time, or some time this evening, talking about hybrid model considerations based on the space limitations that the 6-foot social distance will bring to us. And so, we have 5 models that we'll present to you this evening. The week A, week B model, the AB model, AA/BB model, half-day model, and the phased-in model. And we're going to spend just a little bit of time on each of those so the community has a broader understanding of what exactly those models may entail. Next slide. Okay, Michelle?
Thank you, Marty. And so again, as Marty talked about earlier, we do have a 51-member district group that has been working together over the past few weeks and looking at some different models. So again, as I go through these tonight, know that we've spent time looking at them closely. The groups have been working in about 9 different teams. And so tonight I'll do a brief explanation of each model, and then I'll highlight just a few of the strengths and challenges. I could probably talk for a good half hour on all of those pieces, but do know that those are our conversations. So starting with the week A and week B, this is basically a model where we're having half of the children be on a week A, the other on a week B. The school week could be 4 days with 1 day off or remote learning in the middle, and that would be when teachers have time to plan, collaborate, and participate in professional development. Another variation of this could be 5 days, but with adjusted dismissal times each day to, again, give teachers time to plan, collaborate, and participate in the PD. And all of that would be needed to support both the classroom face-to-face learning and also the remote learning that's going on at the same time. So some of the strengths with this is certainly that it's more like a school schedule in that you're going to go 4 or 5 days and you'll be all day. It could be consistent for families, and again, students attending 4 to 5 days in a row. It does for the transition to the continuous learning plan. When you look at the week on, week off, it means that we would already be doing 2 weeks of remote learning. So to transition to continuous would be smooth. As far as safety goes, again, there's about 9 to 10 days between when week A would finish and when they would come back. So that could potentially minimize the spread of germs. It also gives time for cleaning the buildings. Some challenges certainly that could be is that students end up being at home for the remote learning time, anywhere between 9 and 10 days, right, between their face-to-face learning time. We include the weekends. Relative to educational justice, we certainly have a concern for students and families on this model around being able to be aware of and respond to social emotional needs, to food needs, academic support when they're not in school with us. Additionally, for teacher workload, teachers would be in this situation, again, managing the week A of in their classroom and the week B of students who are doing the remote learning. Please go to the next slide. The next model is A-B, and again, students are divided up into 2 groups, and potentially the A group might attend on Monday and Thursday. The B group would attend on Tuesday and Friday, and then Wednesday would be remote learning for everyone, and that would be the day that teachers would be planning and working on professional development. Some strengths to this model would be certainly the consistent schedule, the ability to see students frequently, fewer off days or remote learning days between your face-to-face learning times. Likely students will feel more engaged and connected to the classroom given the frequency of their face-to-face. So for example, in group A, they might have their first day on Monday and then Tuesday, Wednesday remote learning, and then they're back on Thursday. So you can see the potential for engagement as well as increased accountability. Again, this would also be true for our secondary level. Relative to educational justice, groups that have been most impacted by the COVID closure or having the most needs may be able to attend more frequently than the 2 days a week by possibly utilizing our other school staff. The transition to continuous learning 2.0, teachers will have the opportunity to integrate the online platform on a regular basis within our face-to-face time, which would help with a smoother transition if we need to go to the continuous learning 2.0. Relative to safety, cleaning can be done each evening, and if a child were to become ill, potentially they could miss fewer days rather than if you were sick for 3 or 4 days and you were on the week on, week off, you could just miss an entire week of learning. Some challenges though, one other positive to this would also be that food bags could be sent home with our students on the days they are at school in preparation for the days they are not. A challenge might be, again, around childcare and making sure that those needs could be covered, and so families would need to be looking at that. The next model, go to the next slide, is the AABB model. And that's, again, where you're having 2 groups. The A group, though, here may attend Monday and Tuesday, so we're looking at back-to-back days. Group B could look at Thursday and Friday, and again, that 1 day of Wednesday potentially then being for planning and professional development. One of the strengths that we saw with this model was certainly the consistency to have 2 days back to back. We also felt that teachers then could get more in depth on subjects. And then we knew that just students having an opportunity to learn and then their brain to be thinking and then to come back the next day to review and continue would be positive. Again, with the educational justice, just like in the AB model, those groups most impacted by the closure have the potential to receive additional support. Safety. Again, having the breaks after the 2 days allows for cleaning before that next cohort. So you have back-to-back and then the cohort. Some challenges though with this model is that there are 5 days between seeing students face-to-face. So that could be a challenge. And again, if a student is ill, 2 days in a row, they might just miss that week of face-to-face instruction. Going to the next slide. The half-day model. Again, you're really having half of the school on A and the other half on B, but we're talking about A would be in the morning and B would be in the afternoon. One configuration could be 5 days a week, but noting that the start and the end times would need to be adjusted given that at the midday, you would need to clean the entire school and classrooms and clean all of the buses before the buses turned around and did the second complete route. So that is a substantial amount of time. Again, this model does give consistency in that teachers would see all of the students every day, and you would have that face-to-face interaction. There would be consistency for parents as well. Again, relative to the educational justice, we know that if we are able to see students every day and connect with them, that we're going to be more aware and better able to respond to any social, emotional, mental health, food, or other needs. We also know that those groups who have been most impacted by the COVID-19 closure would also, again, have the opportunity for more intense support. Our IEP students would have, again, the opportunity for their needs to be met on a daily basis. For community supports, we really saw a strength being that for health and nutrition, if you were the AM group, you would have access to breakfast and lunch, and the PM group, we could have lunch and some sort of snack. So you have those 2 meals per day. Probably the biggest challenge with this half-day model is the logistics. And I alluded to those earlier. The bus schedules, we would basically be doubling what we typically do with our current routes. And with that, again, we'd have to have enough time to, after we dropped off the A group, to clean all the buses for the B group, and at school to do all of that cleaning as well. We've costed out the additional transportation costs, and that would be running about $842,000. Again, as well, when we have those cleaning needs, we'd have to make sure that we have staff available to do that prior to that second group coming. An impact on family that we definitely wanted to consider and put out there is that a concern around would the students be able to be engaged in remote learning on either the AM or the PM. And so a wonder about whether our morning group, after getting home from a half day, would be ready and able to participate in their afternoon remote learning. And conversely, with the A group, if they weren't coming till the morning, would they be sleeping in, or would they be ready to go with their remote learning? So again, just some things to think about. Safety on this one, again, was really key here with our staff, especially is that every day then our staff are exposed to a high number of students, being that you have the A group and the B group. And again, that cleaning would be essential. There also may not be as smooth of a transition to this continuous learning 2.0, given that we have that daily interaction. So maybe some parties might be less inclined to focus on the remote learning possibilities. Go to the next slide, please. So the phased-in model, that's the one that we're just looking at today, and the group was just getting in and really thinking outside the box. But with this plan, basically you're prioritizing face-to-face instruction for a group of students that have been very much impacted by the COVID-19 school closure and furthest away from educational justice. And so for the Port Angeles School District, again, a hybrid model, and all students would be at school. And by this I mean, so if we are in an AB model, we may say though that for a particular group of students, we would change their schedule and their frequency at being at school. So we would have a different phase for one particular group of students. Some groups, and this is not an exhaustive list, is there on the screen for you, but let's just say we could make the case that preschool and kindergarten students, we felt needed to be there every day. So that would be their phase piece would be every day, while all the rest of our students would be going on an AB. So again, that's just a quick overview of some of the models, and we will certainly be sharing out more information as it's developed. So thank you.
Slide. So that summarizes really, again, remember we're looking at 3 options for next year, and that's what we've been tasked by the state of Washington, is look at, you know, a regular open, look at a distance or a distance learning model 2.0, and a hybrid. And so An option for our families that we want to make sure that we highlight today is, our Cbu Academy. And so we have our lead teacher, Coco Carlson, coming in this evening to talk about another option. It's not a hybrid option, but another options that families will have the ability to consider. So Coco, can you take the mic?
Thanks, Marty. Good evening. I was asked to speak briefly about Cbu Academy, which is a fairly new program for the Port Angeles School District. We started in December, and I had the privilege of being the online teacher for Cbu Academy. We started with just a handful of students and have grown to almost 50 students in this short period of time. Cbu Academy, it's a free alternative education option for students in kindergarten through 12th grade. Students are provided with online curriculum or district curriculum or a mixture of both online and district curriculum to meet the needs of the grade level, the students, and the families. Students are assigned to one teacher for all of their classes. Their teacher monitors their progress, corrects their work, and reteaches concepts that the student hasn't mastered yet. Next slide. Students are working solely from home. They put in about 30 hours of work each week. They also meet with their teacher one time per week. That meeting can either be face-to-face or virtually based on the health and the safety needs of the community at the time. Next slide. Students that choose to attend Cbu Academy are truly Port Angeles School District students, so they're welcome to participate in any of the extracurricular activities that are available at their home school. Also, students that are enrolled in Cbu Academy may transfer back to their home school at any point that they wish. We have a lot of information about Cbu Academy at our website at cbuacademy.org. Or if you have any other questions, feel free to email me at ccarlson@portangeloschools.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Coco. I appreciate that. So now how the next phase, and again, we wanted to get through our presentation in 20 to 30 minutes. And I know that's a lot of information in a very short period of time, but we wanted to leave ample time for Q&A at this point in time. We are asking that individuals keep questions very concise so that we can get to every attendee's question this evening. We hope that we can do so. The other piece is that at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. We're asking that you submit your question under the Q&A button, and we will prioritize those questions as they come in. So with that said, Christian, who do we have up first?
Carrie Sanford will be asking her question first tonight of Marty. Carrie, I'm going to try and unmute you here. You have a couple listings.
Okay, did that work?
Yes, it did. Go ahead and ask your question to Marty.
All right. Thank you to everybody for, I know to the school district, to all of the teachers and staff, everybody's working really, really hard, and I know we're in unprecedented times. I'm a parent of a incoming sophomore at the high school who is an avid choir participant. It's come to our attention that the hiring process for the new choir director for the high school, middle school has been frozen. So I wanted to check in on that and just advocate really quickly for our music program as a whole. And I know that choir specifically is called out in some of the verbiage in the OSPI guidelines, but there are ways to, just like in sports, to continue upping a game in choir without even singing. So though a choir without singing sounds strange at first swipe, I think it's really important that we continue to have that be a space for our students. It's often, our music programs are often the only place that some of our students feel safe and welcomed, and that social emotional safety and peace is going to be really important in the fall. So if you could speak to that a little, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carrie. I appreciate that question. I want to assure the community that a big part of our delivery model for the Port Angeles School District is the music program. And so most certainly the choir position is in our budget for next school year. Because of the uncertain times and the changing dynamics around what delivery models could or may not look like next year, as a measure, I, as the superintendent, froze all hiring for a short period of time to let us work through the process to determine what our delivery model will look like next year. By all means, Carrie, and to every other listener to this presentation tonight, our commitment is to the music program, but I want to have, and we need to have, some clarity based on what the model may look like. We have 9 outstanding positions across our district at this point in time that are built into the budget. And we're waiting on those hires until we can get through this process and be certain that we're going to have, or have more clarity on what the schedule may look like. So that's a great question. I understand the priority around the music education, and our system understands that. And once we get through this planning process, we will make decisions to move forward on many of those hires. So thank you very much, Karen.
Your next question is Amanda. I am going to unmute your mic. And Chuck will be answering your question, Amanda. Amanda, are you with us?
I think I saw something there. Amanda said she could only type in her questions on her thing. So what I saw for her questions is, what about families who, will there be an option for them to be able to be on all of A or all of B schedule? And so once we get the decision made on how we're going to be able, or which one we're going to be able to do, whether it be A, B, or BB, or whichever one, then very soon after that, we'll be sending home a letter to parents to be able to explain to them what's going on and ask them, will they be returning to Port Angeles School District? Because we need to know by school. If yes, do you prefer A or B group? So that way we can get families on the same one, because it is important if you have a 9th grader and a 3rd grader that you probably want them on the same day for daycare purposes and things like that. So we'll be able to find that out. We'll need to know it by school and by grade level, and whether people are going to choose Cbu Academy. And if they are, so we can get the answer to all 3 of those things. It's going to make a big difference as far as our staffing on how we move staff around from building to building and to be able to do our hiring. So definitely, yes, we'll be asking parents, group A or group B, when we get to that point.
Virginia, you are next up to ask your question of Mr. Brewer.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to know from a child care perspective, if we do the AB model, would that mean that we can only provide care for one of the groups then? Since we would be trying to keep them separate at school, I assume that that's what we would be trying to do at our facility also.
Well, I think if I understand the question correctly, if we have, let's say, a 3rd grade class split into an AB model, and let's just say there's 24 students in the class and 12 come day 1 and 12 come on the B schedule. We would have, in the AB model, we would have 12 students on site during that delivery day. And so the other 12 would be looking for potentially childcare options. So those students and children could be in your facility on that particular day. Where the next day is now the B day, the students that you had during that first day would come to school, and those students that attended school the day before could be in your facility. Does that answer your question, Virginia?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this. Ellis, you will be next in line to ask your question of Pam Sanford.
Hi. Yes, I was just curious, those students who have IEPs, if they will be able to get their therapies in person or if it will remain with the way that it's been this past spring.
So right now, the recommendation from OSPI is to prioritize the delivery of services for students with an IEP as we look at what groups will be returning back to school this fall. Of course, this is still dependent upon which model the district goes with. Our staff is fully prepared to adhere to safety and health guidelines, looking into various PPE equipment, example for speech language pathologists to have face shields so students can see their face when they do the therapy. But absolutely, we're trying our best to prioritize in-person services to our best ability while still maintaining health and safety guidelines. And I know that probably sounds kind of vague, but I am part of that fall return work group, and that has been a continuous discussion point. So we are fully staffed and ready to go as soon as we get kids. In addition, should we have to stay with a truncated model, so to speak, and we can't fit those in, we'll work as individual IEP teams. So I encourage you to reach out to your child's case manager when we do return to school in the fall. And this goes for any family with a student with an IEP, and work out those details as far as this is my priority, this is what was working, this is what wasn't working, and go from there. So, but again, that remains our commitment to try our best.
Erica Zeman, you will be up next to ask your question of Coco Carlson.
Hi, my name is Erica. I'm the mom of an 8th grader. I was curious if students who enroll in Cbu, if they can participate in band or other electives.
Yes, students enrolled in Cbu, actually I have quite a few students that are enrolled currently that take a lot of electives at the high school. So they're in band, orchestra, they do a lot of their CTE courses up there. So yes, we do quite a bit of hybrid schooling.
Pollyanna, your question will be up next for Mr. Brewer. Sorry, just one moment here. Go ahead, Pollyanna.
Yes, thank you. I'm just curious to know if the students might possibly have to wear masks to school.
Yeah, thank you, Pollyanna. I appreciate the question. As of today, and again, there's a lot of dialogue happening across the state of Washington and within the governing body or the governing agencies, including the Department of Health. Right now, the positioning of our health officials is yes, students and staff will be expected to wear masks. As I referenced earlier, there is substantial dialogue right now around a replacement for elementary age students from a mask to a face shield. That has not been, decided or ruled out just yet, but there is dialogue around that. I met with our health official just today, and she is fully vetted and committed to students and staff wearing safeguards to protect the spread of the virus. And so, if we were to start school today, the answer would be yes. But I would encourage you, Pollyanna, to just stay, pay attention, or not pay attention, but follow where we go over the next several weeks, because I anticipate to get more updates and changes around some of the guidance that we have coming out of the health department. But to answer your question today, the answer would be yes.
Adam, you are next up to ask your question of Mr. Brewer.
Hi, thank you. I just want to know if year-round schooling model, if one of those has been considered as part of the proposals, because that might free up some of the scheduling issues, but also might hinder them. I don't know the whole picture there, but just wondering if that was being considered. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Adam. And that's exactly why we have forums of this nature, to hear, all of the thinking outside the box. Our core team of the work group that we've put together is considering any and all options. So in fact, I just wrote that down, and we will be certain that we consider and have some dialogue based on that concept of year-round schools. Appreciate the feedback.
Sean, give me just 1 minute here, and you will be asking your question of Mr. Lisk. Go ahead, Sean.
Hi there. Thank you for having us. And I'm a father of a 4th grader. I have some questions about Cbu. I'm wondering if you have any estimated enrollment for Cbu for the next academic year, and what would be the student-teacher ratio cap for the classes in that program?
We're prepared to have as many kids as parents want to have to be part of Cbu Academy. That will add teachers accordingly. So I think signed up right as of today, for sure coming, there's about 78. We have paperwork that's been sent out to about 125 that we expect to have be coming back in. When you say student-teacher ratio, that's a little bit difficult to say, because I'll tell you right now that it's 1 to 35, which sounds like a lot, but a math teacher at Port Angeles High School, it has 150 kids, because they're doing 25 kids per period for 6 periods a day. At Cbu Academy, when you have one teacher like Ms. Carlson, she's going to oversee 35 kids, but she may see 3 subjects at once for each student at the same time. And again, all the students are not online at the same time. They do their work when they choose to do it. Many of the elementary age kids, parents have them going in a set time, which makes sense, in the morning or midday. Many of the high school kids and the junior highs don't start their work until 6 o'clock at night and keep going till 2 in the morning, because you can see when they've gone in and put their work in and ask questions and get back and forth. So it's pretty fluid as you go through that. But 1 to 35 is what our goal is, to keep it so they get good feedback and attention for each of the kids.
Marie Miller-Bryant, your question will be next for Mr. Brewer.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. So I have 4 children. Kindergartner that was this year, she'll be 1st grade, and then so on and so forth. I have 4. I will have one that will be in Cbu, and I was concerned on whether or not that he would get like a lunch or a breakfast, because we do. This is one of those households that does rely on that aspect.
Okay. Yeah, so you're specific to the child that will be in the Cbu Academy. Yeah, absolutely, Marie. We don't have a food service delivery model for Cbu Academy, but Lincoln High School is right next door. And so if you coordinate with the teacher, Coco Carlson, and her office, we will most certainly make sure that your child is served the meals that he deserves and needs. Absolutely.
And then I had another question. Are we opposed to children wiping down their own desks with disinfecting wipes or whatever it is that they touch during the AB, whatever protocols that you guys were just talking about?
Yeah, the types of cleaner that we use, it's very safe to use. It's the primary component of it is hydrogen peroxide, so it's very, very safe. But when we use PPE in a school setting, we have to provide training to use that type of equipment and or product. So, the short answer is it would be difficult to ask, our students to clean the desk because he or she would not have been trained to use the product. But to commend our teachers, when we were in the middle of the beginning portions of the pandemic, we asked our staff, all of our staff, for help around keeping hard surfaces clean. And nearly every teacher and every staff member of the Port Angeles School District stepped up and said, yes, I'll get trained and I will help keep hard surfaces clean. So even in those last few days, we were certain that our hard surfaces were being cleaned multiple times a day. So short answer is students, probably not, but our staff is fully engaged in healthy practices at school. And we hope that and know that will continue in the future to make sure that all students and staff continue to be safe within our educational institution.
Heidi Peterson, you have the floor. Are you still wanting to answer or you ask your question?
Yes, my question was answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andrew Cooper, you are up next.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a second year at the high school going into. My preference is for a face-to-face model. I feel like it's hugely important for kids' mental health, for the social aspect of school as well as the educational aspect. Not every kid does well on an online program. So that being said, getting to my question, what's the school committee's preferred delivery model option at this stage, specifically geared towards the high school students?
Thank you, Andrew, for your question. So we as a group are going through all of the models right now and looking at each model for its strengths and challenges for each level, whether elementary, middle, or secondary. So we have not made a decision yet because we're still researching, but I would say that we agree with you that absolutely as much face-to-face contact time as we can is what our goal is, while still following the health requirements. We also wholeheartedly agree with you that it's imperative and so important for all of our students, but also for sure at high school for those social and mental health and academic reasons. So there's a lot balancing back and forth on that. What I could probably allude to is that given those pieces of face-to-face, really wanting to maximize that probably we're least likely to look at something that's more of a whole week on, whole week off, because we wouldn't have as many opportunities to interact with all of our students on a regular basis. But stay tuned, we'll be getting more of that information out to you. Thank you.
Jennifer Saul, you'll be up next to ask your question to Mr. Brewer. I apologize. It looks like we have a technical issue there. Ms. Spurline, if you could read Jennifer Saul's question for Marty, please.
Sure, thank you. Just a moment. So Ms. Saul's question is, will we lose the best candidates by the freezing hire? Or hiring freeze, my apologies.
Thank you, Jen. And that was asked by whom, Jennifer?
Yes, Jennifer Saul.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Jennifer, for the question. I would say under most circumstances, that would be absolutely correct. This year, with regards to the pandemic and also the budget crisis that is soon to, well, has hit many families in our community, and very much so state revenue. You know, many, if not all, in fact, I'm not aware of any district in our immediate area, and I include, you know, reaching out to Kitsap counties as well, that are currently hiring. Right now, most, if not all districts, there might be an exception, but most, if not all districts are, you know, they have a freeze at this point in time to work through the process similar to how we're addressing that. So I believe to get the high quality candidates that we deserve here in Port Angeles for every child, you know, we have a little more time this summer. And so under most circumstances, Jennifer, I believe you're 100% correct. But this year, I believe might be the exception based on the budget crisis. You know, to add a little more to that is, you know, there's conversation and dialogue at the state level among the legislators, you know, coming back together to reduce budget mid-year. And those are all really significant considerations for our district to make sure we have the capacity to pay, you know, all of our employees and pay to keep school operational. So at this point in time, we are taking a fairly conservative approach. But again, we get through this model and this process and, you know, have a vision for what the fall looks like. You know, we will be out in the ranks to hire necessary personnel. Thank you for the question, Jennifer.
Emily April. I apologize. It appears that we have a version issue here. I'm going to have Ms. Spurline read your question for Michelle Olson.
Yes, thank you again. Just a moment. All right, Miss April's question is remote learning, meaning being on a computer for 6 hours a day during the off day in the AB model or the AABB model? That's the first question, and then there is a follow-up.
All right, well, thank you for the question. So certainly at this time, we are looking at the larger structure of the AB, but as we get into the instructional setup and certainly the expectations around remote learning, we will be looking at that more carefully. I will reference back to the guidance that OSPI put out for us this past spring around what is developmentally appropriate for different ages of students. And so again, that information that OSPI put out is based on best practice and research. So we will be referencing that research and OSPI's guidance as we lay out the expectation for the remote learning.
And second question by Ms. April is, will there be some time and effort to acknowledge the significant mental health impacts of the COVID-19 changes that our kids have experienced? Wearing a mask and staying 6 feet away will be difficult for most.
Yeah, I can't tell you, Emily, how much this topic has come up in every single one of our meetings, in every single group. It's really, it weighs on us heavily. We know that students during that first, this past spring, that there were so many unknowns and a loss with not being at school and being able to connect. We know that that was hard on not only just students, but families, but also staff. And there's a level of trauma with that. So we are planning, and it is certainly part of the state's expectation, but it's our plan as well to create a plan that addresses first identifying what those needs are relative to social, emotional, and mental health, not only just for the students, but having an opportunity to connect with families and figure out what model and what resources that we can connect them to, whether in the school or within our community, which also gets to another level of our plan, which will ensure that we are working closely with our community agencies and partners to make it easy to access those supports and services. We anticipate, again, getting to know students and connecting early on and wanting to do everything we can to focus on building that positive relationship right at the beginning and letting students know that their teacher is there for them and will do everything they can to help them be successful at learning. But we will have a very detailed plan for that. So thank you for that question.
Ian Miller, you're up next to ask a question of Mr. Brewer. Ian, are you able to, should be able to unmute your mic at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and, Ms. Spurline, if you would please, Ian Miller's question, who may be having some technical difficulties, if you could ask it of Marty, please.
Sure. So Marty, the question is, what do you have any thought as to what it would trigger to return a full remote learning situation? Examples are certain rates of infection in the community, evidence of community transmission, things of that nature.
Yeah, great question. Was that Ian that asked that question, Jennifer?
Yes, it is Ian.
Yeah, Ian, that's a great question. In fact, I just had a conversation today with our local health official, Dr. Allison Unthink, and she referenced her commitment to keeping our schools open throughout next year. And the question was posed, what would it take for a full closure? And quite candidly, she stated that even a case within a school will not lead to potentially a closure of that school and or district. But if there is community transmission within that school, meaning they can't contact trace it back to a source and quarantine individuals, to safeguard the rest of the population, they could close that school at that particular time. But Dr. Allison Unthink's positioning today was she's fully vetted in trying to keep the schools, not just of Port Angeles, but Clallam County open through this pandemic.
Teresa Bjorns, Michelle Olson will be answering your question. Go ahead, Teresa.
Oh, thank you for taking my question. And I'm a teacher and a parent, but I am just having trouble imagining the youngest of our children keeping their hands away from their faces and so on. And we live in such a beautiful place. And I know that there are a lot of forest kindergarten programs, I think down in the Seattle area. And I was just wondering what the possibility is that we might be able to do something like that with our youngest students.
Hi, Teresa. So thank you for your question. And in our group, we have not yet had that conversation around that particular program. But as Marty alluded to earlier, ideas that are being shared here tonight are things then that we will add to our list to talk about. So thank you for sharing that. And I will make sure that our group takes a look at that. Thank you.
Amber Eck, you can go ahead and ask your question of Mr. Brewer.
Thank you very much. I was just curious about the family survey. I think it said 7.4% did not have access to Wi-Fi. My concern was, were paper surveys mailed out, or was it just available electronically? So I'm wondering if that's a true sample of our population for the Port Angeles School District.
Yeah, Amber, that's exactly correct. Of those surveyed, 7.4%, did not have the means. So most certainly the number is obviously higher than that based on to do that survey, you needed to, access technology. So there is, a consideration there that will, it doesn't have a true representation of our community. Agreed. And no paper pencil survey was sent out.
Mahina Hawley, you'll be next to ask your question of Mr. Brewer.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead with your question.
Okay, so thank you guys. First of all, I know that you guys are putting in a lot of hours, and I appreciate all of that. My son is going to be entering, hopefully, kindergarten in the fall. It's my first child in the public school system. And being that he's going to be entering kindergarten, and I feel like, especially in young learning, play is one of the most important parts of learning and development, and kids need not just academics at that age, but they need to be learning basic skills like how to stay in your seat and how to stand in line and how to raise your hand, how to not push or hit your other classmates, how to share, all of those kind of social skills that are learned in the kindergarten. And so one thing I kind of am concerned about is just how will the limiting of close contact in classes, putting their desks 6 feet apart and having them wear face masks, which, whatever, if they have to wear face masks, that's fine, but how will that relate to recess time and them being able to play together and develop those social skills?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, and welcome to our school system. I wish it were under different circumstances. I'll start the answer to this question, and then Michelle may be able to add some additional layers to this. But the introduction and social emotional learning of all of our learners, particularly the young learners, very, very important, and our teachers are very, very skilled and at helping students feel comfortable. No doubt this fall could look very, very different. That on the surface doesn't look real inviting, but I think the relationship side of the work that our teachers are so dedicated to do and do so very well, will help, overcome that. With regards to play areas, and again, after meeting with Dr. Allison Unthink today, as our health official, asking that very question on playground, what does the playground look like? Well, her response today was that we need to do our due diligence to try to stagger recesses the best we can. Meaning, instead of having all grades out at recess at the same time, can we have 2 or 3 classes at a time? And that's a challenge for our system to try to figure out how we can, make that work. So reduce the number of students on the playground. Allison, or Dr. Unthink, was, very understanding around, 5 and 6 year olds, and mask and play is so very, very important. And so she indicated that, it's going to be nearly impossible to keep students at 5 years old and 6 years old out playing out on the playground, outside of 6 feet the whole time. And that's not really the expectation for a child that age, because it's not just what the important part of what Allison, the Department of Health, is getting at. It's the duration of the exposure. when a student is sitting in a class, he or she will sit in that class for, 5 or 6 hours a day, depending upon the grade. And so, there's lots of time sitting next to your peer that's either symptomatic or asymptomatic to potentially spread that. And that's why that 6-foot rule applies. But when you have casual interactions that are less than 15 minutes, and this is not, Marty Brewer's rule of 15 minutes. This is driven by the science. It's a 15-minute exposure. That's when the risk goes up. And so for students to be playing on the playground, swinging on swings next to one another, or, throwing a ball back and forth, of course, we want to make sure when they come in, you wash their hands. But we're going to have to really work hard as a system to make sure that we also have the opportunity for kids just to be kids. And Dr. Allison Unthink is in that camp. And our students need to practice good hygiene. Our students need to try to wear masks. Our students need to try to social distance. But the bottom line is, it's not going to happen, 100% of the time. And as long as that exposure doesn't last more than 15 minutes, it's not really high risk at that point in time by our health official. And so, it's going to be a challenge. And I appreciate your question, but we're gonna make sure that we try to give your child and all children of our school district the experience that they deserve, given the requirements that we now have through the health department. But fortunately, we have, I think, a very good health official that understands, the social emotional side of students and also the developmental stages of our students. And so we're going to work really hard at that. And I hope that we can make your child's first year in our school a really positive one.
Mahina, you had a second question regarding families choosing A or B. I'm going to unmute your mic if you'd like to phrase that question for Mr. Brewer.
Okay, yeah, my second question was just, and by the way, thank you for the answer to the first question. That answered it very nicely. My second question was whether or not whether we can choose or whether you will choose the A and B groups based on the neighborhoods that kids live in. My son, plays with other kids in the neighborhood outdoors only right now. And they're not in the same grade level as him. They're not going to be in his class, but it would just make it so much easier if all the kids in the same neighborhood kind of had the same schedule. So I didn't know if that was possible.
Yeah, this is new to us, and depending on where that hybrid model goes, we're going to do everything within our power to try to accommodate all of those special circumstances and families that exist. You'll have our commitment, and can we execute it to the fullest extent? Probably not, but you'll have our commitment to make it work the best we can make it work for every independent family. So, Chuck, did you want to add anything?
No, that's when we put out that letter after it is decided what kind of format this hybrid will take. We're really going to need parent input on whether you choose A, you choose B, because a lot of people, not just because of neighborhood, again, because of the family, because of their family needs of having the kids in the family on the same day too. So there's going to be lots of different things we have to take into consideration. So it's going to be really important to get good feedback when we send that letter out after the decision's made to find out what it is you need as a parent.
Jacob and Sasha Burton, your question is up next for Mr. Brewer. Go ahead.
My question is attained to parents. Will parents be able to volunteer in the classroom during this time at all?
Based on the guidance that we have today, and again, I think that will shift and change over the next couple of months, but we're going to have to pay very careful attention to visitors, and one of the social distancing measures was limiting visitors in the school. I know it's critical, and an important part of public education is to have visitors and volunteers in our classrooms. You know, that's our commitment moving forward, but there might be a temporary phase where we have to really, you know, pay close attention to that for the safety and well-being of keeping our students or our schools open. So we're committed to that long-term. It may look a little different based on requirements from the health department next fall, but you know, we're open to having volunteers in all cases. We just may have to scale that back just a little bit next fall. Again, more to come on that as more guidance evolves. I'll be able to give you a better answer as we get closer to the school year.
Laura Bullen will be enabling your mic to ask your question of Mr. Chuklesk. Sorry, one moment here. Go ahead, Laura. Laura, are you with us?
Jennifer, can you read the question? I can't see it. Maybe we can answer if they have technical difficulties.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I had two questions about CVU. My first question is, there some sort of deadline this fall for applying to CVU? And my other question is, if we start an in-person school this fall and transition to the distance learning 2.0, could a student at that point transition into CVU?
Yeah. Cbu Academy is a regular part of the Port Angeles School District, and you can transfer into it or out of it to your neighborhood school at any time. So that's not a problem. I know there was another question on there too about could kids on IEPs be in Cbu Academy? The answer to that is also yes. And I saw one other question, so I'm just going to take care of these CVU ones while they're there and we're on the subject. Is Cbu Academy, could they take band or something at the other schools? And yes, I think Coco talked about that a little bit, but I really do want to stress that we love it to have kids who want to be able to take a CTE class, a band class, a math class, whatever it may be at the regular neighborhood school, and then do their other classes through Cbu. It is very accommodating to full-time students or to part-time. So as far as when is the cutoff date, is just like anything else. You can register for our school year anytime. So could you transfer over in November? Yes, you could. We'd love it if you're really considering Cbu Academy, that call and ask more questions during the day. We can go over things in more detail, send you some paperwork. And if you're committed to it, the sooner we know, the better we can do to make sure we have the teachers in line to be able to be ready for the students. Good question.
Jennifer Sperling, can you please read Joe's question for Mr. Brewer?
Sure, just a moment, please. So Joe's question is, can face shields be worn instead of cloth masks?
Yeah, today that question's evolving. If I had to answer the question today, was it Joe, Jennifer?
That is correct. Another great J name, Joe.
Thanks. Yeah, Joe, if I had to answer it today, it would be face mask. But I believe there's conversation, at least for the elementary age students, that there might be some allowances in the near future for face shields. But again, that's my own personal opinion based on how I see this conversation going and what input I got from Dr. Unthink today. Initially, the OSPI came out with guidance that would allow for a replacement between a mask and a face shield offering. Governor Inslee's most recent order for face mask has created another layer of complication that the health department just simply has to work out. So initially we had some variance there, and now there needs to be additional conversations around the new laws that Governor Inslee has enacted recently. So more to come on that, Joe. I encourage you to stay close in contact with us, and we will keep you apprised to the developments as we get closer to the school year.
Jamie Wood's question is up next, but we're not able to activate her mic. Jennifer Spurline, if you could please read Jamie's question for Marty.
Sure. Jamie's question had to do with the upcoming senior class, and let me be more specific here. The question is about how are we going to celebrate that incoming senior class and give them the important celebrations they all look so forward to during their senior year, like homecoming, scholarship night, graduation. And again, that is from Jamie Wood.
Thank you, Jamie. Great question. I think we will do our very best, and you know, the path we're headed now. You know, we will have some in-school experiences. Not sure what model we'll be working with, but those in-school experiences will give us the ability to celebrate, you know, our senior class, which is most certainly deserving, and every other class of our system. So I think, you know, the opportunities to get back into a brick and mortar school in some capacity will give us much more opportunities than maybe we had this spring with the closure from the March 17th date on. I can assure you that, you know, our staff, you included, Jamie, are very much committed to the students and the community. And, you know, we're going to make the best of this situation. And I know the high school staff will make sure that they do their due diligence to make sure that our seniors, you know, have a great experience their senior year. What that looks like and feels like today, I can't, you know, answer that, but I can answer we will be committed to that class and every class of our community and our schools to make sure that they have the experience they deserve. So more to come on that one. Thank you, Jamie.
Clallam Mosaic, your question, and go ahead for Mr. Chucklisk.
Actually, this is Priya. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay. So my question has to do with Cbu Academy as well, and it has to do with the model where you have one teacher assigned to each student. That suggests that there may not be subject matter expertise for every subject that a student is taking in the advanced grade level. So could you just speak to that a little bit?
Well, right now we have 3 staff members that are hired for this, middle school and 2 secondary teachers. So just because they're assigned one teacher doesn't mean we won't use the expertise of the entire team to help out in situations to be able to get the best instruction and best tutoring possible back and forth. So the one is connected is the day-to-day, is the paperwork, who's going to correct it, things like that. You know, the communication, the one you build a relationship with. But if there's a subject, high-level math, for example, and the teacher that's been assigned to that isn't comfortable with that one piece, then one of the other teachers will take over and work with your student at that time.
I have a question here by Krista Hanan. Not seeing her listed anymore, so I'm not sure if we dropped her. Jennifer Spurline, would you go ahead and read Krista's question, please?
Sure, just a moment, please. All right. Krista's question was, in what ways will social distancing and the wearing of face masks be enforced with students? Will this be punishable like other school rules?
So thank you for the question. You know, we've had to approach this whole closure with grace and forgiveness. And so the expectation will be for the health and safety of our entire school's community. You know, for students, you know, that are more developed. When we talk about students in the middle and high school, very different from students at the kindergarten age. But we're gonna work with students to help them, and students and families, to help them understand the benefits of social distancing when you can, the benefits of wearing a mask, and you know, there are some allowances for staff and for students around disability and the mask concept. So, you know, we don't really want to head down the path of, you know, punitive consequences for, you know, not practicing good hygiene and good, you know, practices as it relates to the pandemic. We want to help, you know, families and students understand, you know, why we're taking these measures. And I think we're all in it together because, you know, we all here, everybody in this room and every staff member of our school system wants, and our board want our schools to be open. And so if we work together and, you know, practice social distancing the best we can, practice, you know, wearing the mask when we can make our schools safer and we can keep our schools open. Because that's what we all want here. You know, all 150 individuals in this room tonight have a special interest in their child and their children and attending our schools. And so if we can work together rather than making it consequences, that's going to be, you know, our first, you know, expectation and how we want to do business. Thank you for the question.
Chelsea Clearman had a question for Mr. Brewer. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I know you guys are probably just tirelessly working on everything, so I just wanted to thank you. This is just a question that I know not only a parent, as a working parent that I have, but both of us work, and I'm a little worried if we go to a model that has days on and days off, or mornings on and afternoons off, whatever we choose, are there going to be additional programs for children who can't be at home with their parents at that time? After school programs or other care options? I have a little one going into kindergarten, so this is all nerve-wracking for me.
Thank you for the question, Chelsea. Yeah, and welcome to your new kindergarten. We love having our kinders. They're the most fun, right? But you know, to answer your question, excuse me, I'm drawing a blank. Can you reframe that question one more time for me? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Just for children who have working parents and who are financially unable to take the time off to spend time with children who might be, depending on whatever model we all decide on, how is that going to be accommodated for children who aren't able to be home with parents who aren't, you know, they're working? Sorry, I'm having a hard time.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. We've been working for the last several weeks with community-based groups around childcare options in both Sequim and Port Angeles communities. And there's representation from not all, but a number of the community childcare providers at the meetings, and they're very curious and interested in our work, so that they can work to help accommodate the school system and the working families. So that's layer one. We're committed to working with them. In fact, I had a meeting with the group just today, working with the Clallam County child care providers. We're also committed to try to find providers within our schools. Tomorrow, and the board hasn't taken action on this, so it's not official just yet, but we're putting out a request for proposals to our community, and it will be on Friday if the board approves it tomorrow night, so that we can provide space within our schools for a child care provider in each of our 5 elementary schools. Currently, we have CNC at Franklin, and we have the YMCA out at Dry Creek. And so we're hopeful that each of those partners will reapply to be a part of this concept moving forward, and we'll find 3 additional partners. Because our vision is we would love to have a community partner in each one of our spaces. And if the board, takes action on that tomorrow night, we'll have the ability to provide square footage to partners at a very cost-effective model, and potentially even offer some food service opportunities to these vendors or these providers. So we're encouraged by that. We're encouraged by the feedback we've received from the work group that we're a part of, and their eagerness to see us put that out into the community to see maybe what rises for options for families. So we're working at that, and I hope we have more concrete answers in the next several days around how we can help your family. Chelsea.
Bear with me one moment here. Rich, Cal, you're up next to ask your question of Mr. Brewer. Go ahead, Rich.
Yes, so we were wondering how masking would be addressed in PE classes, or if PE classes would be available at all in the new model. Thank you.
Yeah, our PE classes will be an important part of the social development of our students. In fact, that's probably what many of our students are missing the most. And so when we work through the details of the model, our intent is to be able to have physical education offered to students within our system. Still working out how exactly that will work out. We're going to ask, if we get to that point, Rich, we're going to ask that PE teachers change how they deliver instruction, meaning we're not going to engage in high contact events like basketball or sports. Basketball is high contact where you have close proximity, but rather skill development, throwing, running, jump roping, where, social distancing can be, exercise. That's kind of a play on words, excuse that. But yeah, so right now, the ruling's still out on during physical education classes, will students be required to wear masks? I can't answer that today, but most certainly we can, exercise different activities that allow for social distance and give the students the movement that they need. So thank you for that question, Rich.
Kate Dexter, you'll be up next here in just a moment. Kate, go ahead and ask your question for Mr. Brewer.
Hello. I have a question most specifically about my high school student, but I'm just wondering, and this probably, like a lot of other things, the jury is still out on, but has there been any thought about how band might work? Because band is definitely a class that keeps him interested in school. And so it would be nice to know if that's going to even be a possibility.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. again, you know, music is one of the centerpieces of this school district. And so I'm not sure today how we're going to figure it out, Kate, but we'll figure it out. And, you know, I don't envision, in fact, talking to Dr. Unthink today, you know, the option is not to sit in a room blowing in a flute and, you know, spreading potential, the virus within the room. That's not going to be an option. But our, you know, musicians in particular are pretty creative on how they can do their work. We're going to have to sit down and figure it out. We're not there yet. You know, we want to establish the model. Once we've done so, then we're going to start working on all the logistics. And to be honest with you, the amount of work we've done from the closure to today has been substantial, but the work we had up ahead of us will probably multiply that times 2. So, but Kate, you have the district's commitment that, you know, moving forward, we know what we stand for, we know what's important to our community, and we're going to work hard to figure it out. Thank you, Kate.
Sarah Feller, you will be up next to ask your question of Mr. Brewer. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
My question was about masks and how those will be supplied. If we are going to be expected to send our child to school each day with a clean mask from home, or if those will be supplied by the school.
Good question. Right now, the recommendation from the health department is a cloth mask for students. So we're not talking a disposable mask. So if your family has a mask that is a preference for your child, you know, you can most certainly do that. We have reached out to the mask making groups of Port Angeles to ask if they would have interest in helping us to, you know, sew. Think about this, like 3,500 masks. And initially, Dr. Allison Unthink referenced, you know, each student might need 3 masks so that, you know, the families can keep them clean, you know, every 3rd day. So we will, if a family doesn't have a mask that they would like their child to wear, we will most certainly be in the business of providing masks for children as they enter school.
How will you make sure that they're actually coming with a clean mask though? Because I could envision, you know, that just grabbing a mask on the way out the door and a pile of masks that they just, you know, use regularly.
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, a big part of our job moving forward, Sarah, will be, you know, we've got to work better than ever before with our community, and you know, this has to be a partnership. And so, you know, we're going to have to communicate around those, you know, things, those simple things around, you know, sending students to school with a clean mask. And what if they don't? What does the school system do? I mean, you know, how do we, you know, care for that? We're going to have some backup masks on site, you know. So again, getting back to all of the logistics that we're going to have to figure out here. But yeah, my hope is that we can really value the partnership and work with families to make that a priority. And if that simply can't happen, then we will, you know, have to make some accommodations.
Adam and Gabby Johnson, please go ahead with your question for Mr. Brewer. Adam or Gabby Johnson? Ms. Spurline, if you could please read their question. They may be having some technical difficulties for Mr. Brewer.
Sure. The Johnsons were wanting to know if we have some sort of plan for, quote, resuming to normal, unquote, and what is that going to take?
Yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, that's a great question. We're really good as an organization at running quote unquote regular school. In fact, the staff in the room might look a little cross at me, but I think if we got the go ahead to open school, on a Friday, we could pull it off on a Monday. It'd be a lot of work, but we could most certainly do that, because ultimately all of us that are doing all this work at the district level, we want school to be back to regular delivery, and that's what we yearn for. That's what educators are in this business for, is that personal connection with each of the families and the students. And so I know that we would have the commitment to turn it around in 48 hours. We have to have a plan to be able to turn around to a distance learning model in 24 to 48 hours. I'm certain we could pull off the opening of school in that same amount of time, or very similar. So thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, for the question.
Jessica Smith, you will be up next to ask your question of Ms. Sanford. Not seeing her. We may have lost her. Ms. Spurline, could you go ahead and ask that question of Jessica Smith from Ms. Sanford?
Sure. So Ms. Smith asked, what about people who are deaf or hard of hearing? If they need to read lips, can they wear face shields? How are we going to deal with that?
Right, so the guidance from OSPI indicates that for students who are deaf or hard of hearing, clearly wearing a cloth face mask would obstruct the communication process. So they have recommended that educators should keep an unobstructed view while maintaining compliance with CDC and Washington State health guidelines, which could be anything from wearing the face shield or a clear or plastic face covering of some type. And so it, as guidance continues to roll out, I have seen some models that incorporate a more of a clear vision with the mask, but definitely I'm looking at a shield or the mask as modified.
Janet Vaughn, you're up next for answering or asking your question of Mr. Brewer. Go ahead, Janet. Janet, are you there? Ms. Spurline, would you please ask Janet's question to Marty Brewer?
Sure, and this may be a duplicate question, but wanted to ask it again in case it was not. So Ms. Vaughn is wanting to know, how will we deal with social distancing with kids being outside more, keeping in mind staff and student safety?
Or for recesses, Jen?
It isn't specifically said, but I am assuming that was the intent of the question.
Yeah. So one of the guiding principles in the OSPI document is, weather permitting, provide more offerings outdoors. It's not debatable that, the ventilation is much better outside, and your opportunities to transmit this virus is much less in an outside environment. And so that being said, events like recess, although we still will ask students to social distance when appropriate or when they can, but still have fun and throw a ball back and forth and swing on a swing. And, we'll still ask students to be conscious of that, but it's less of an exposure risk in that type of environment. Again, asking the question of the health officer today, it's still out around, or the ruling's still out with regards to students wearing a face mask or not at recess. I can't answer that tonight, but exposures at recess or outdoor events are much less than the brick and mortar. Thank you.
Mike French's question is up next, but he doesn't have a mic. Ms. Spurline, if you would, for Ms. Sanford, please.
Sure. So Mr. French's question is, will there be a nurse at each school full-time next school year?
So we currently have 4 registered nurses in the school district, one of those being a lead nurse. Prior to COVID, our nurses were assigned their building schedules based on students who have IEPs with nursing services in those IEPs, as well as students who may have a 504 or a healthcare plan with a medical condition such as diabetes, which needs nursing oversight and daily management. With the lead nurse, her primary responsibility, besides being assisting with management and organization of the other nurses and being assigned buildings herself, is also involved in policy and our meetings with our incident command team in managing the COVID closure. So going into fall, I will maintain consistent communication with the lead nurse as well as Superintendent Brewer and our county health official, Dr. Unthank, and determine our medical needs and nursing support needs and education needs as they pertain to health and safety as we get closer to school starting.
Max, you are up next for a question for Ms. Sanford. Go ahead, Max.
So Max asked that I read the question. So he's wanting to know if kids with asthma are considered those who don't have to wear a face mask.
The guidance from OSPI for students who have certain respiratory conditions or trouble breathing is to not wear a face mask. However, I would put the caveat in there. It's always best to check with your child's healthcare provider to get specific guidance on the use of a cloth face covering as your child's healthcare provider that manages your child's condition would be the best authority on that. But OSPI guidance is saying that no.
Andrew Cooper, you're up for asking Mr. Brewer a question. Go ahead, Andrew.
What's the timescale for making a decision and when's the hard deadline to come up with a model?
Thank you, Andrew. My hope is our work group has been working all this week. We meet 9 to noon daily. We have meetings scheduled tomorrow and Friday, and then Monday and Tuesday of next week. Our initial goal was to have the model selected, not the logistics, but the model selected by June 30th. That's not the final approval process. It will then be my responsibility to capture that recommendation from this work group to then take to the school board. And I believe the date is July 23rd, where we will take our recommendation to the school board for the official approval. So informally, I believe it will be June 30th. A formal recommendation will be July 23rd.
We have a question here from Chelsea Becker, but it looks like she's no longer with us. Ms. Spurline, if you would, for Mr. Brewer, please.
Sure. So Ms. Betker had 2 questions, Marty. The first being wondering about ideas of how to help younger students adjust to a new teacher when they're wearing a mask and they don't know what they look like and missing out on facial expressions.
Yeah, Michelle, you want to take a shot at that one? You might be better equipped with.
Sure. So again, great question. We definitely at the elementary level have been talking about this a lot and wrestling with it, to be honest, about what are going to be the most effective ways to really build that connection with our young students and really with all of our students. So we are reading, we're researching, you know, to find out what are those best practices. There certainly are districts around the country and around the world that have been, you know, doing these types of models ahead of us. So we are reaching out to them as well to figure out what they have found and used, especially to work with our youngest learners. But we're gonna, I mean, really, like all we always do, set up our learning classrooms and community to be inviting. Certainly we'll continue. We've talked about how important it is, you know, not just with our, you know, right here with our mouth, but like to be expressive with our eyes and right, with our tone of voice. So we don't have an exact piece, but to know that every single teacher is vested in finding the best way to make connections with all of our students. Thank you.
Great, and Ms. Betker's follow-up question, Marty, is for you. Will the decision for the model last all year? Or is there a chance that school will resume normally at some point, maybe in the spring? Or again, does it last all year?
No, we're being asked by the State Department to have 3 plans next year: distance learning 2.0, hybrid, and regular brick and mortar. And so I think we're being asked that question for the very reason that we may be expected to transition to any one of those 3 in a 24 to 48 hour period of time. So, you know, depending on the conditions, it might be more restrictive or less restrictive as our health department dictates.
The next question is by Ellis. However, they are no longer with us. The question is for Mr. Chuck Lisk. Jennifer Spurline, could you please read that for Ellis?
Of course. So the question is, how would these models that are being suggested apply to students in the Ridge?
The Ridge is an elementary school classroom just like all the others, and so they all have to apply to the social distancing rules and regulations that all the rest of the classrooms at the building will have to apply to. So the AB model will be very similar because there's more than 15 kids in a class in most cases. And so they'll be divided into 2 of some sort if we go to, depending on which one of these hybrid models we end up selecting. Thank you for the question.
Amanda, you will be up next to ask your question of Michelle Olson. Go ahead, Amanda. Amanda, are you still with us? Oh, I'm sorry, she doesn't have a mic. Ms. Spurline, will you please read that question for Amanda?
Sure, I'm trying to locate it. Just a moment, please. Oh, I believe Amanda's question was regarding the days that students aren't in the classroom. So for example, if it's the AABB model and they're out of the classroom for 5 days, what kind of work or learning will be done at the home during that time?
Thank you for the question, Amanda. And so that is part of what our conversation and planning is with our district group right now. To figure out what that would look like, the structure, what is developmentally appropriate for the different grade levels and the different students. The other piece, we of course have learned a lot from this past spring relative to remote learning on the, you know, when it was an everyday piece. So there were pieces from that that worked really well, and then there were pieces of that were challenges for us. And so we've collected that information from teachers, we've heard from parents, and so we are are actively, as we are researching the model, also actively looking at what are the best practices for remote learning times, and what do we have to have as far as tools to be available to support students. And so that could be things from talking about, you know, do we need to have the Wi-Fi access? How do we ensure students have appropriate technology? And so one of the things that our district is committed to is to be a one-to-one district, so that we can ensure that every student has a Chromebook. And so that would allow that continuity of learning to be both in the classroom and then to the remote learning at home. We plan, again, as we put together this bigger plan, as we identify best practices, to also make sure that we're providing all the support necessary for our teachers, so they clearly understand what is best practice. We also know that whatever remote learning platform that we're using, that we need to make sure that we're taking time to explain and teach that to not only the students, but also to those of us who are parents that also need to understand that. But again, we are going to make the most use of our face-to-face time, and are, again, looking at ways that we would then connect that to the learning that would be taking place remotely on those other days. So thank you for your question.
Up next, Amy Woods' question for Mr. Brewer. Jennifer Spurline, she has left our Zoom meeting. If you could please phrase that question for Mr. Brewer.
Oh, sure. So Amy was inquiring about student athletes in elective classes, and will there be fall or winter sports, and will we also be having elective courses?
So WIAA has recently put out guidance for interscholastic activities, and they outline allowable activities within the phases of Washington State reopening plan. And that has been vetted by the Department of Health. So today received some clarity from Dr. Unthink around that very question. And how she referenced it today was if we are in phase 2, you know, practices in a smaller scale can occur, meaning 5 students or less. If we move to phase 3, that number increases to 50. Again, social distancing and mask will apply, and attention to contact and social distancing. And she did make a statement today that fall sports would, you know, only be capable of competing with neighboring or within the league if a district were in phase 3 or phase 4. And if we were in phase 3, we would only be capable of participating with schools within that county. That was her guidance as of today. So more to come on that. Electives are an important part of our delivery model, and both at the middle and the high school, it will be necessary to allow for electives to be taken by our students. And so again, you know, once we select the model, we'll work out the details, but you know, we anticipate having students with the ability to take multiple electives throughout the year. Thank you.
Julie Fisher is up next to ask Mr. Brewer a question. Go ahead, Julie.
Yes, I was curious about how buses might run on these models, and if they would be running on their same routes, or if the routes would have to be modified.
Yes, thank you for that question, Julie. Right now, the buses are somewhat exempt from the social distance guidance. And I think this is, recognition by state officials, state health officials, that to have school, we have to get students to school. Now, we need to, social distance when we can. Wear face masks will be a requirement, and checking to make sure that healthy students are loading the bus will be a requirement. But the way it's been framed from health officials thus far is, and if you think about it in just terms of the length of the route, it's obviously most of them are greater than 15 minutes, but they're referencing keeping the windows down and loading the bus in a way that the bus doesn't become full at any one given stop. Is social distance, in the early parts of the route, and as the bus starts to fill to capacity, that's near the end of the route. In theory, that may be 15 minutes or less with the windows down. So oddly enough, right now, the transportation or the buses are somewhat exempt, although we need to pay special attention to do our due diligence to make sure we have a safe community. We're going to change the practices on the bus, but the same social distance guidance that is required in classrooms is not what's required on the buses at this point in time. Thank you for the question.
Our next question comes from Wendy Caldwell for Pam Sanford. Go ahead, Wendy.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Hello? Okay, so my question is, I'm a preschool teacher, and when it comes to children who are on an IEP and they go to developmental preschool, they get transferred. But I'm wondering if you guys are looking more into the model where, because I know transferring kids from site to site isn't preferred. So would you guys be going into the kids' classroom where they're already at, or are you going to still keep it at the elementary schools?
So I oversee developmental preschool, but I'm not sure what you're meaning by transfer site to site.
Okay, so Head Start, you guys, the bus would pick kids up at Head Start and then take them to school. In Squim, where I worked last year, they actually, the developmental preschool came to our sites at Head Start. So I didn't know if you guys were looking to model like that, or?
Yeah, so we actually currently do both. It depends on the student's IEP, and we have a actual continuum of service options for students who are in developmental preschool. And that was built to ensure that we're honoring the least restrictive environment. So we do have agreements already with our local Head Starts that if a student is in Head Start and can receive their services there and receive FAPE, then we absolutely go there to serve them. If their needs are greater and they do need to come to our developmental preschool class, then that's what they would do. I do appreciate, though, your question of that, because then that puts it into another realm of my thinking as far as that transfer, and we just want to try to minimize students, want to keep them in cohorts, but minimize student interaction with other cohorts. And so I definitely will take your thoughts and your considerations back to the work group team as we look at developing our models for the fall. Thank you.
Miranda, for Marty Brewer, and this will be our last question for the evening. Go ahead, Miranda.
Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I was just wondering how, if we do the online model, you know, how are we going to be supporting our parents who need to be working, especially for smaller children?
Yeah, right now we're in communications with some local childcare providers that are working alongside us, not within the group, but alongside us I'm very curious as to the delivery model so that they can provide the necessary supports for families based on those off hours. Tomorrow night, I'm going to take to the board of directors a RFP, which is a request for proposal to potentially bring 5 providers within our elementary schools. Currently, we have CNC at Franklin and the YMCA at Dry Creek, and I'm hopeful that they will continue, and we'll find another 3 providers that can provide services to working families in each of those 5 elementary schools. So we're trying to partner with local agencies to come up with more options, more healthy options for working families and elementary age students. Thank you, Miranda, for your question. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for spending 2 quality hours with us this evening. Lots of good conversation and good feedback. When you leave this evening, you will be prompted for a survey. That's really, really important to us as we utilize the information, the data from this evening, as well as our work group can utilize that information to help guide our decision-making process. So please take just a few minutes to fill out the survey based on, the 6 choices that we really have, and rank ordering them from 1 to 6. 6 or 1 being your greatest or your favorite choice, and 6 being your least favorite choice. That information will most certainly be utilized by our work group to make, some substantial decisions within our system. And finally, the work of this survey and this parent survey from earlier in the month and this presentation will also be on our website. And so we plan to put a lot of information on our website around this process and how we're going to get to that final decision. So please make a common practice to come to our website and visit the resources that we'll place there for increased communications. So with that being said, I certainly appreciate everybody's time this evening. Thank you to the panelists, appreciate your efforts, and thank you to the school board for attending this important work session. And thank you very much, and have a good evening.